Sarah Mitchell had always lived in the shadow of her wealthy best friend Emma. While Emma enjoyed designer clothes and expensive vacations, Sarah worked double shifts at a local diner to pay for her college tuition. Their friendship began in high school when Sarah tutored Emma in mathematics, and despite their different backgrounds, they became inseparable. Everything changed the day Sarah met Emma's father, Richard Blackwood, at Emma's 25th birthday party. Richard was a successful businessman who had built his empire from nothing after his wife's death 15 years earlier. At 52, he was distinguished, charming, and surprisingly down-to-earth despite his billions. Sarah was serving drinks at the party, helping the catering staff to earn extra money. When she accidentally spilled champagne on Richard's expensive suit, she expected anger. Instead, he laughed and told her not to worry about it. They started talking, and Sarah was surprised by how easy it was to converse with him. He asked about her studies, her dreams, and listened with genuine interest. Over the following months, Richard began appearing at places where Sarah worked or studied. He claimed it was coincidence, but Sarah suspected otherwise. He would order coffee at the cafe where she worked part-time, always sitting at her table. When she mentioned struggling with her business courses, he offered to mentor her. Emma thought it was wonderful that her father was helping her best friend succeed. The mentoring sessions became longer and more personal. Richard shared stories about building his company and overcoming failures. Sarah found herself looking forward to these meetings more than she cared to admit. He was intelligent, kind, and treated her as an equal despite their age and wealth differences. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at work, Sarah broke down in front of Richard. She had been rejected for a scholarship and worried about finishing her degree. Without hesitation, he offered to pay for her education. Sarah refused, not wanting to be seen as taking advantage of their relationship. Richard respected her independence but continued to support her in other ways. He recommended her for internships, introduced her to influential people in the business world, and gradually, their relationship evolved from mentor and student to something deeper. The turning point came during Emma's graduation trip to Europe. Richard had planned to join them but had to cancel due to business emergencies. Instead, he asked Sarah to stay behind and help him with the important project. Emma was disappointed but understood her father's work demands. During those 2 weeks alone, Sarah and Richard's relationship transformed completely. Late nights working on business proposals turned into intimate conversations about life, dreams, and fears. They discovered they shared similar values about hard work, family, and giving back to the community. One night, while reviewing contracts in Richard's study, he confessed his feelings for Sarah. He told her that she had brought light back into his life after years of focusing solely on business and raising Emma. Sarah admitted she felt the same way, though she was terrified about what this meant for her friendship with Emma. Richard suggested they keep their relationship private until they figured out how to tell Emma. He knew his daughter would need time to process the news, and he didn't want to hurt her or damage her friendship with Sarah. They agreed to take things slowly and see where their feelings led them. For the next several months, Sarah and Richard conducted a secret relationship. They met at his private office, took quiet dinners at restaurants outside the city, and spent weekends at his secluded cabin in the mountains. Sarah felt guilty about hiding this from Emma, but Richard convinced her it was temporary. The secret became harder to maintain as their feelings deepened. Richard showered Sarah with gifts she couldn't explain to Emma. He helped her find a better apartment and even bought her a car, claiming it was an early graduation present. Emma began to notice changes in Sarah's lifestyle, but attributed it to her friend's new internship connections. Sarah struggled with the deception. Every time Emma talked about dating or complained about her father being too busy for family dinners, Sarah felt the weight of her secret growing heavier. She wanted to tell Emma the truth, but Richard always found reasons to delay the conversation. The relationship reached a crossroads when Richard proposed during a romantic weekend getaway. He presented Sarah with a stunning diamond ring and asked her to marry him. He promised they would tell Emma together and that their love was worth any temporary difficulties it might cause. Sarah said yes, overwhelmed by emotions and Richard's passionate declaration of love. She believed that Emma would eventually understand and accept their relationship. After all, Emma wanted both her father and her best friend to be happy. Richard assured her that once Emma saw how much they loved each other, she would give them her blessing. They planned to announce their engagement at Emma's birthday party the following month. Richard wanted to make it special, showing Emma that Sarah would become part of their family officially. He believed that presenting it as a celebration rather than a confession would help Emma accept the news more easily. As the party approached, Sarah became increasingly nervous. She practiced what she would say to Emma, imagining different scenarios and reactions. Richard remained confident that everything would work out perfectly. He had raised Emma to be understanding and mature, and he trusted that she would want their happiness above all else. The night before the party, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stared at the engagement ring, wondering if she was making the right choice. She loved Richard deeply, but the thought of potentially losing Emma's friendship terrified her. She had never imagined that finding love would force her to risk the most important friendship of her life. Emma's birthday party was everything Richard had planned it to be. The ballroom of his mansion was decorated with white roses and golden lights, creating an elegant atmosphere. Emma looked radiant in her designer gown, surrounded by friends from college and the social circles she moved in. Sarah arrived early to help with preparations, her engagement ring hidden in her purse. She had decided to wear it only when Richard made the announcement. Throughout the evening, she watched Emma laugh and dance, knowing that in a few hours, everything might change between them. As the evening progressed, Richard gave his traditional birthday speech for Emma. He spoke about watching his daughter grow into a remarkable woman and how proud he was of her achievements. Emma beamed with happiness, completely unaware of what was coming next. Then Richard's tone shifted. He mentioned how the past year had brought unexpected joy into his life. He talked about finding love again after many years of focusing solely on work and raising Emma. The room grew quiet as guests sensed something important was about to be announced. Richard called Sarah to join him at the front of the room. Emma's face showed confusion as her best friend walked toward her father with obvious nervousness. Richard took Sarah's hand and announced that they had fallen in love and were engaged to be married. The silence that followed felt eternal. Emma's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like betrayal. The guests began murmuring among themselves, some offering congratulations, while others whispered about the unusual situation. Emma excused herself from the room without saying a word. Sarah immediately followed her, finding Emma in her childhood bedroom, sitting on the bed with tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to me?" Emma asked, her voice breaking. "You're supposed to be my best friend. How long has this been going on?" Sarah tried to explain, but Emma cut her off. She felt betrayed not just by the relationship, but by the secrecy. She realized that for months, both her father and her best friend had been lying to her. Every conversation, every shared moment had been built on deception. "You were probably laughing at me," Emma said bitterly. Poor little Emma, so naive she doesn't even know her best friend is sleeping with her father. Sarah insisted that wasn't true, that she had wanted to tell Emma many times but hadn't known how. She explained that they had fallen in love gradually and hadn't planned for it to happen. She begged Emma to try to understand. Emma's hurt turned to anger. She accused Sarah of using their friendship to get close to Richard and his money. She pointed out how Sarah's life had suddenly improved. The new apartment, the car, the expensive clothes. Emma claimed that Sarah had been playing a long game, pretending to be her friend while targeting her father all along. The accusation stung because Sarah knew how it must look to Emma. She tried to explain that the relationship was real, that she genuinely loved Richard and hadn't pursued him for his wealth. But Emma was too hurt and angry to listen to reason. Richard appeared in the doorway, having left the confused guests downstairs. He tried to mediate between the two women he loved most in the world. He told Emma that the relationship was his idea, that he had pursued Sarah, not the other way around. Emma turned her anger on her father. She accused him of being inappropriate, of taking advantage of Sarah's vulnerable financial situation. She said he had put both Sarah and her in an impossible position by pursuing his daughter's best friend. The argument escalated quickly. Emma threatened to leave and never speak to either of them again. Richard tried to remain calm, explaining that love doesn't follow rules or timelines. He asked Emma to give them a chance, to see that their happiness didn't diminish his love for her. Emma refused to listen. She packed a bag and announced she was moving out immediately. She couldn't stay in a house where her father and best friend had been conducting their secret affair. The betrayal felt too deep to forgive. Sarah begged Emma to reconsider, promising they could work through this together. She offered to call off the engagement if it meant saving their friendship, but Emma said it was too late. The damage was done, and she could never trust either of them again. As Emma prepared to leave, she delivered a final blow. She told Sarah that their entire friendship had been meaningless if Sarah could betray her like this. She said that real friends don't steal their best friend's father, no matter what feelings might develop. Richard tried one more time to convince Emma to stay and talk things through as a family. He reminded her of all the years they had been close, all the love and trust they had shared. He promised that nothing would change between them as father and daughter. Emma looked at him with eyes full of pain and disappointment. She said that everything had already changed the moment he decided to pursue her best friend in secret. She couldn't look at either of them the same way anymore. The birthday party ended in disaster. Guests left quietly, sensing the family drama that had unfolded. Richard and Sarah were left alone in the empty mansion, their engagement announcement having destroyed the most important relationship in Emma's life. Sarah spent the night crying, wondering if her love for Richard was worth losing Emma forever. She had never imagined that following her heart would lead to such devastating consequences. The engagement ring felt heavy on her finger, a symbol of love that had come at too high a price. Richard tried to comfort Sarah, assuring her that Emma would eventually come around. He believed his daughter's anger was temporary, and that time would help her see that their love was genuine. But Sarah began to doubt whether their relationship could survive the cost of Emma's hatred and the destruction of a lifelong friendship. 3 months passed without any contact from Emma. Sarah tried calling and texting, but Emma had blocked her number. She sent letters to Emma's new apartment, but they were returned unopened. The silence was devastating for Sarah, who had never gone more than a day without talking to her best friend since high school. Richard attempted to reach Emma through her workplace and mutual friends, but she refused to see or speak with him. Emma had effectively cut both of them out of her life completely. Friends and family members found themselves caught in the middle, unsure whether to choose sides or try to mediate. The wedding planning became a somber affair. Sarah had dreamed of having Emma as her maid of honor, but now she had to plan her wedding without her best friend. Every decision felt hollow, knowing that Emma wouldn't be there to share the most important day of her life. Richard hired private investigators to keep track of Emma's well-being from a distance. The report showed that she was working long hours at a marketing firm and had started dating someone new. She appeared to be building a life completely separate from her father and former best friend. Sarah threw herself into her studies and work, trying to distract herself from the pain of losing Emma. But everywhere she went, she was reminded of their friendship. The coffee shop where they used to study together, the park where they jogged every weekend, even her favorite restaurant held memories that now brought only sadness. The couple decided to have a small private wedding ceremony. Richard hoped that if Emma heard about it through mutual friends, she might reconsider and attend. He left her name on the guest list until the last possible moment, but she never responded to the invitation. On their wedding day, Sarah wore a beautiful designer gown and carried white roses, but her smile felt forced. During the ceremony, she kept glancing at the empty chair they had reserved for Emma. Richard noticed her sadness and squeezed her hand, whispering that everything would work out in time. Their honeymoon in Italy was supposed to be romantic and healing, but Sarah couldn't fully enjoy herself. She found herself taking pictures and thinking about how she used to share everything with Emma. The absence of her best friend cast a shadow over what should have been the happiest time of her life. When they returned from their honeymoon, Sarah discovered that Emma had been spreading her version of events to their mutual friends. Emma painted Sarah as a gold digger who had manipulated both her and her father. She claimed that Sarah had planned the entire relationship from the beginning, using their friendship as a way to get close to Richard's wealth. The rumors spread quickly through their social circle. Some friends believed Emma's version while others defended Sarah. The friend group that had been tight-knit for years began to fracture and take sides. Sarah found herself losing friendships she had valued for years. Sarah tried to defend herself, but her explanations sounded weak against Emma's passionate accusations. The fact that she was now living in Richard's mansion and enjoying a luxurious lifestyle seemed to support Emma's claims about her motives. The situation became more complicated when Emma started her own blog and social media accounts dedicated to exposing what she called friendship betrayal. She shared their personal text messages and photos from over the years, highlighting moments where Sarah had complained about money or mentioned finding Richard attractive. Emma's online campaign gained followers who enjoyed the drama of a real-life soap opera. She became something of an influencer, sharing advice about recognizing fake friends and protecting yourself from manipulation. Her pain was real, but her public campaign was destroying Sarah's reputation. Richard considered legal action to stop Emma's online harassment, but Sarah begged him not to. She didn't want to make the situation worse by involving lawyers. She hoped that Emma would eventually run out of anger and move on with her life. The stress began affecting Sarah's health and her marriage. She lost weight and had trouble sleeping. Richard tried to be supportive, but he was also struggling with the loss of his relationship with Emma. He blamed himself for not handling the situation better from the beginning. Sarah began to wonder if Emma had been right about her motives. Looking back, she questioned whether she had unconsciously pursued Richard because of his wealth and status. The doubt ate at her, making her question the authenticity of her own feelings. The breaking point came when Emma published a particularly vicious blog post that included private photos from Sarah's childhood and family background. Emma revealed embarrassing details about Sarah's family's financial struggles and suggested that Sarah's entire personality was built around escaping poverty. The post went viral, with thousands of people commenting and sharing their opinions about the situation. Sarah became an internet target, with strangers analyzing her every move and motivation. The online mob mentality turned her life into a public spectacle. Sarah realized that Emma's campaign wasn't just about expressing hurt feelings anymore. It had become a deliberate attempt to destroy Sarah's life and reputation. The friend she had loved like a sister was now her worst enemy, determined to make her pay for her perceived betrayal. The situation forced Sarah to confront some uncomfortable truths about their friendship. Looking back, she remembered times when Emma had been possessive and controlling. Emma had always needed to be the center of attention and had subtle ways of keeping Sarah in a subordinate position. Sarah began to wonder if their friendship had been as healthy and equal as she had believed. Perhaps Emma's extreme reaction wasn't just about the betrayal, but about losing control over someone she had always seen as beneath her. The possibility that their entire friendship had been built on an unhealthy dynamic was almost as painful as losing Emma in the first place. As the online harassment continued and their mutual friends chose sides, Sarah realized that the naive girl who had believed in unconditional friendship was gone forever. She was learning hard lessons about loyalty, manipulation, and the price of following your heart when it conflicts with other people's expectations. 6 months into their marriage, Sarah discovered something that changed everything. While organizing Richard's home office, she found a hidden folder containing documents that made her blood run cold. Inside were detailed background reports on her, dating back to before they had ever met. The reports contained information about her family's financial situation, her academic performance, her work schedule, and even her daily routines. There were photos of her taken without her knowledge, notes about her personality traits, and assessments of her relationship with Emma. Sarah's hands shook as she read through the documents. One report was titled, Subject Analysis, Sarah Mitchell, and contained a psychological profile describing her as ambitious but financially vulnerable, and emotionally dependent on friendship with target's daughter. Another document outlined a strategy for natural contact and relationship development. The most damaging document was a conversation transcript between Richard and someone referred to only as M. In this conversation, Richard discussed his plan to approach Sarah gradually, using her financial struggles and her loyalty to Emma as leverage points. He mentioned wanting to secure a younger wife who would be grateful and controllable. Sarah felt sick as she realized that their entire relationship had been orchestrated from the beginning. Every accidental meeting, every kind gesture, every moment she thought was genuine had been carefully planned and executed. She wasn't just a gold digger as Emma had claimed. She was a victim of an elaborate manipulation. The documents revealed that Richard had been watching her for months before their first official meeting at Emma's birthday party. He had researched her background, her weaknesses, and her dreams. He had targeted her specifically because she was poor, ambitious, and emotionally attached to his daughter. One particularly chilling document outlined how Richard planned to isolate Sarah from Emma. Eventually, it described Emma as a potential obstacle who would need to be managed or removed from the equation. The plan included strategies for making Emma appear unreasonable and jealous when she inevitably discovered the relationship. Sarah realized that Richard had anticipated Emma's reaction and had prepared for it. He had known that proposing at Emma's birthday party would create maximum drama and force Emma to react emotionally. He had wanted Emma to look like the irrational one while he appeared as the calm, reasonable father trying to balance love and family. The documents also contained financial records showing that Richard had been monitoring Sarah's expenses and debt for months before approaching her. He had timed his offers of help to coincide with her most desperate financial moments, ensuring maximum impact and gratitude. Sarah discovered that even her apartment and car hadn't been gifts born of love. They were calculated investments in maintaining control over her life and freedom. Richard had ensured that she became financially dependent on him before proposing marriage. The betrayal felt even deeper than what Emma had experienced. At least Emma had been betrayed by people she trusted. Sarah had been hunted, studied, and manipulated by a predator who had disguised himself as a loving mentor and partner. Sarah confronted Richard that evening when he returned from work. She showed him the documents and demanded an explanation. Richard's calm demeanor cracked for the first time since she had known him. He didn't deny the evidence but tried to justify his actions. Richard claimed that his feelings for Sarah had become genuine over time even if they hadn't started that way. He insisted that the investigation had been necessary to protect his family's wealth and reputation. He said that many wealthy men researched potential partners to avoid gold diggers and social climbers. Sarah pointed out that she had been the opposite of a gold digger. She had repeatedly refused his financial help and had tried to maintain her independence. Richard admitted that her resistance had been part of what attracted him to her. Her authenticity in refusing his help had made her seem more trustworthy and genuine than the women who usually pursued him. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with his explanations. She demanded to know if Emma's reaction had been orchestrated as well. Richard reluctantly admitted that he had anticipated Emma's response and had prepared strategies for dealing with it. He claimed he had hoped Emma would be more understanding, but he had backup plans in case she wasn't. The conversation revealed the full extent of Richard's manipulation. He had played both women against each other, knowing that their conflict would ultimately benefit him. If Emma accepted the relationship, he would have both his daughter's approval and his young wife. If Emma rejected it, he would have successfully isolated Sarah from her support system, making her more dependent on him. Sarah realized that Richard's wealth and power had corrupted him in ways she hadn't recognized. He saw people as assets to be acquired and managed, rather than as individuals with their own agency and feelings. His business success had come from his ability to manipulate situations and people to his advantage. The discovery explained why Richard had been so confident that Emma would come around eventually. He had backup plans for winning Emma back, including strategies that would make Sarah appear to be the primary villain in the situation. He had been prepared to sacrifice Sarah's reputation to restore his relationship with his daughter if necessary. Sarah felt trapped and terrified, She had no money of her own, no job, and no friends left to turn to. Richard had systematically removed her independence and support system. Even her family lived far away and wouldn't be able to help her escape her situation. When Sarah threatened to leave, Richard's mask slipped completely. He reminded her that she had signed a prenuptial agreement that would leave her with almost nothing if they divorced. He had made sure she was legally bound to him with little recourse for escape. Richard's tone became cold and calculating as he explained her options. She could stay married to him and enjoy a comfortable life as long as she didn't cause problems, or she could leave with nothing and face a destroyed reputation. He mentioned that he had evidence of her gold-digging behavior that he could release if she tried to expose him. Sarah realized that the man she had married was nothing like the person she thought she knew. The kind, generous mentor had been an act designed to trap her. The real Richard Blackwood was a manipulative predator who saw marriage as another business transaction to be controlled and managed. That night, Sarah lay awake planning her escape. She knew she needed help, but she had burned bridges with almost everyone in her life. There was only one person who might understand what she was going through, and who had also been victimized by Richard's manipulations. Sarah decided to reach out to Emma, despite knowing that Emma might reject her completely. Emma was the only other person who truly understood Richard's capacity for manipulation and deception. If Sarah could make Emma see the truth about her father, they might be able to work together to escape his control. Sarah spent days planning how to contact Emma without Richard knowing. She couldn't use her phone or email because Richard had access to all her accounts. She couldn't meet Emma publicly because Richard's security team might report back to him. Finally, she decided to approach Emma at her workplace during lunch break. Sarah waited outside Emma's office building, hoping to catch her alone. When Emma emerged for lunch, Sarah called out to her. Emma's face hardened when she saw Sarah and she started walking away quickly. Sarah followed, desperately calling Emma's name and begging for just 5 minutes to explain. Emma finally stopped and turned around, her eyes blazing with anger. She told Sarah that she had nothing to say to her and that Sarah's attempts to contact her were harassment. Sarah quickly blurted out that Richard had manipulated both of them and that she had proof. The mention of proof made Emma pause. Sarah quickly pulled out copies of some of the documents she had found, including the psychological profiles and surveillance photos. Emma's expression changed as she recognized herself and Sarah in the photographs taken without their knowledge. Emma agreed to go to a private coffee shop where they could talk without being overheard. Sarah showed Emma all the evidence she had gathered, explaining how she had discovered Richard's true nature. Emma listened in stunned silence as Sarah revealed the extent of her father's manipulation and control. At first, Emma was skeptical, thinking this might be another manipulation on Sarah's part, but the documentation was too extensive and detailed to be fabricated. The timestamps on the surveillance photos proved that Richard had been watching Sarah long before their supposed first meeting at the birthday party. Emma began connecting dots from her own experiences. She remembered her father asking unusual questions about Sarah over the years, questions about her financial situation, her family background, and her relationship goals. She had thought he was just being a protective father figure, but now she realized he had been gathering intelligence. Emma also recalled times when her father had seemed to engineer situations that would put Sarah in his path. Business events, where Sarah was coincidentally working, charity functions where Sarah happened to be volunteering, and social gatherings where Sarah was always invited despite not knowing the other guests well. The revelation that her father had deliberately orchestrated the destruction of their friendship was particularly painful for Emma. She realized that Richard had known exactly how she would react to the news of their relationship and had counted on her emotional response to isolate Sarah further. Emma felt sick as she understood that her father had used her love and trust against both her and Sarah. He had manipulated her into becoming the villain in Sarah's story, while positioning himself as the reasonable adult trying to manage a difficult situation. The two women sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of Richard's deception. Their entire conflict had been engineered by the man who claimed to love them both. Emma had been turned into a weapon against her former best friend, without realizing it. Sarah apologized tearfully for her part in the deception, explaining that she had genuinely believed their relationship was real. She admitted that she should have been more suspicious of Richard's interest in her and his timing in pursuing the relationship. Emma struggled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to maintain her anger at Sarah for sleeping with her father, regardless of the manipulation involved. But she also recognized that they had both been victims of Richard's calculated schemes. Gradually, Emma began to remember positive aspects of their friendship that Richard's manipulation couldn't erase. She recalled how Sarah had always been supportive during difficult times, how she had celebrated Emma's successes without jealousy, and how she had been genuinely caring and loyal for years. Emma realized that her father had deliberately targeted their friendship because it was real and strong. He had seen their bond as an obstacle to his control over Sarah and had systematically worked to destroy it. The strength of their friendship had actually been what made it such a threat to his plans. The two women began planning how to expose Richard's behavior and help Sarah escape the marriage. Emma had resources and connections that Sarah lacked, including access to lawyers who weren't connected to Richard's business network. She also had trust funds and property that her father couldn't control or monitor. Emma revealed that she had suspected something was wrong with her father's behavior for months, but had attributed it to grief over their estrangement. She had noticed him becoming more controlling and paranoid about his business dealings and personal relationships. Sarah shared details about her current living situation, including Richard's threats and the prenuptial agreement that trapped her financially. Emma was horrified to learn that her father had essentially purchased a wife and was holding her prisoner through legal and financial manipulation. They decided to gather more evidence before confronting Richard or involving authorities. Emma had access to her father's personal files and business records through her inheritance rights. She agreed to search for additional documentation while Sarah continued to secretly photograph and copy materials from his home office. The reunion wasn't without tension. Emma made it clear that she was helping Sarah because they had both been victimized, not because their friendship could immediately return to what it had been before. The betrayal and pain were still real, even if they now understood the manipulation behind it. Sarah accepted Emma's conditions, grateful for any help in escaping her nightmare marriage. She understood that rebuilding their friendship would take time and might not even be possible. The priority was exposing Richard's behavior and preventing him from victimizing other women. Over the following weeks, the two women worked together to build a case against Richard. They discovered that Sarah wasn't his first victim. Emma found records of similar investigations into other young women over the years, including some who had mysteriously disappeared from the social scene after brief relationships with her father. The evidence painted a picture of a serial manipulator who used his wealth and power to control vulnerable women. Richard had refined his techniques over years of practice, learning how to identify targets, manipulate circumstances, and isolate victims from their support systems. Emma and Sarah realized they had uncovered something much bigger than a single case of marital manipulation. They were dealing with a predator who had been operating with impunity for years, protected by his wealth and reputation. The question now was whether they could gather enough evidence to stop him before he found his next victim. Emma and Sarah's investigation revealed a pattern of predatory behavior spanning over a decade. They found documentation of at least 6 other women Richard had targeted using similar methods. Some had escaped before marriage, while others had been trapped in brief marriages that ended quietly with substantial settlement payments and non-disclosure agreements. The evidence included recorded conversations, financial records showing payments to private investigators, and correspondence with what appeared to be a network of people who helped wealthy men find and manipulate vulnerable women. Richard wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger operation that treated women like commodities to be researched, acquired, and controlled. Emma discovered that her father had been using her social connections to identify potential targets for years. Many of the women in the files were friends or acquaintances of Emma's whom Richard had met through social events and family gatherings. He had been using his own daughter as unwitting bait to lure women into his orbit. The most shocking discovery came when they found evidence that Richard had been drugging some of his targets during the courtship phase. Medical records and pharmacy receipts showed regular purchases of substances that could be used to make women more compliant and emotionally dependent. Sarah realized this explained some of her memory gaps and unusual emotional responses during their early relationship. Armed with extensive evidence, Emma and Sarah contacted law enforcement and several attorneys who specialized in cases involving wealthy perpetrators. They also reached out to investigative journalists who had experience exposing powerful men who abused their positions to harm women. The legal process was complicated by Richard's wealth and connections, but the overwhelming evidence made it impossible for him to deny the charges. Several of his previous victims came forward once they learned they weren't alone, providing additional testimony about his methods and behavior. Richard's arrest made headlines across the country. The story of the billionaire who had systematically hunted and manipulated young women captured public attention and sparked conversations about how wealth and power could be used to abuse vulnerable people. Emma's courage in exposing her own father was particularly noted by the media. During the investigation, Emma and Sarah's relationship began to heal. Working together toward a common goal helped them remember why their friendship had been so strong originally. They supported each other through the difficult legal proceedings and media attention that followed Richard's arrest. Emma testified against her father in court, a decision that cost her relationships with some family members who felt she should have stayed loyal to him. But she knew that protecting other potential victims was more important than maintaining family loyalty to a predator. Sarah's marriage was annulled based on the evidence of fraud and manipulation. The prenuptial agreement was thrown out when the court determined that Sarah had been coerced into signing it under false pretenses. She was awarded a substantial settlement that would allow her to rebuild her life independently. The trial revealed the full extent of Richard's network. Several other wealthy men were investigated and charged with similar crimes. Private investigators who had participated in the surveillance and manipulation of women faced criminal charges. The case led to new legislation protecting people from this type of systematic harassment and manipulation. Sarah used her settlement money to establish a foundation that helped women escape manipulative and controlling relationships. She partnered with legal aid organizations to provide resources for women who didn't have the connections and support that had ultimately saved her. Emma inherited control of her father's business empire, but chose to restructure it completely. She sold off several companies and donated significant portions of the wealth to organizations supporting women's rights and protection from domestic abuse. She was determined to use the resources her father had accumulated for good rather than evil. The friendship between Emma and Sarah was forever changed by their experience, but it emerged stronger in some ways. They had learned that they could trust each other even in the most difficult circumstances. Their shared trauma had created a bond that couldn't be broken by future misunderstandings or conflicts. Both women sought therapy to process the psychological impact of Richard's manipulation and abuse. They learned to recognize the signs of manipulation and control in relationships, becoming advocates for other women who might be vulnerable to similar predators. Sarah completed her education and built a successful career in business consulting, specializing in helping small businesses owned by women. Her experience with Richard had taught her valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation in professional settings, as well as personal relationships. Emma became a prominent advocate for victims' rights and used her platform to speak about how family members and friends could better support people in abusive situations. She emphasized the importance of believing victims even when their stories seemed unlikely or complicated. The case against Richard resulted in a 20-year prison sentence. Many of his assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims. The network of people who had assisted him was dismantled, preventing them from targeting other vulnerable women in the future. Years later, Emma and Sarah remained close friends who supported each other through life's challenges. Their experience had taught them that true friendship could survive betrayal and manipulation when both people were committed to healing and growth. Sarah eventually found love again with a social worker named David, who had helped other victims of Richard's network. Their relationship was built on honesty and mutual respect, qualities Sarah had learned to value above wealth or status. David understood her trauma and supported her advocacy work without trying to control or change her. Emma also found happiness in a relationship with a fellow attorney who worked in civil rights law. She had learned to be cautious about potential partners' motives, but she hadn't let her father's betrayal make her cynical about love entirely. Her partner admired her strength in standing up to her father and supported her continued advocacy work. The two women often spoke at conferences and events about their experience, helping other people recognize the signs of systematic manipulation and abuse. They emphasized that predators like Richard often appeared charming and successful on the surface, making their victims feel special and chosen. Their story became a case study in psychology and law enforcement courses, helping professionals understand how wealthy perpetrators could use their resources to abuse multiple victims over extended periods. The documentation they had gathered became a model for how to investigate and prosecute similar cases. Sarah's foundation grew into a national organization that had helped hundreds of women escape controlling relationships. The foundation provided legal support, temporary housing, job training, and counseling services. Emma served on the board of directors and helped fund expansion into underserved communities. Both women had learned that healing from betrayal and manipulation was a lifelong process. There were still days when they struggled with trust issues or questioned their judgment in relationships, but they had developed healthy coping mechanisms and support systems that helped them navigate these challenges. The case had also revealed how communities could unknowingly enable predators by being impressed by wealth and status, while ignoring concerning behavior. Emma and Sarah worked to educate people about how to support victims and question powerful individuals when their behavior seemed inappropriate. Richard's imprisonment had not ended their work. They knew that other predators were still operating, using similar methods to target vulnerable women. Their advocacy continued as they worked to prevent future victims and support those who had already been harmed. The friendship that had survived manipulation, betrayal, public humiliation, and legal battles had become unbreakable. Emma and Sarah had learned that true loyalty meant protecting each other from harm, even when that harm came from family members or romantic partners. Their story served as a reminder that predators often targeted the relationships that victims valued most, using love and loyalty as weapons against them. But it also showed that those same relationships could become sources of strength and healing when people chose to support each other rather than compete or judge. Years after Richard's conviction, both women had built fulfilling lives that honored their experience while moving beyond it. They had transformed their trauma into purpose, their betrayal into wisdom, and their broken friendship into an unshakable bond that continued to inspire others facing similar challenges.